All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Today is a pretty big day because what we're going to be doing in this particular week is moving on to setting up the framework for your paper. Now, obviously, we've been starting with this process in the past week. We've been talking about the general arrangement of things, specific material that you're going to be looking for, how to locate resources on that. And the assignment that's going to be due at the end of this week is going to focus very heavily on that. How do you set up a skeleton of your paper? How do you organize all the different areas so that you're ready to fill in the information as we progress and you get to break down all the stuff that you've been going over? Many of you have gotten to the point now where you could probably write your entire paper, honestly, because you've done the analyses, you seem to understand what's going on with that data, you seem to be able to understand how to tie it into the context of what we're looking at. And honestly, you probably have the ability to start even working on the entire paper. But there are a number of you that aren't quite there yet. My hope is that you are in the process of getting help with how to do the data analyses that you're supposed to be doing. And you're getting help with how to interpret the results that you might get once you do the correct analyses. But regardless of where you're at, ready to go with the entire paper or working on some side stuff, we do want to move forward in this particular week. So we're going to be getting those paper outlines together and focusing our attention on the thing that I know pretty much everybody's settled in, topics that are going to be going over, how it ties into the context of everything else that you've done research on before starting this class, but in the beginning of this particular class. So what we're going to be doing here for this assignment is writing up what's called a skeleton paper. You're going to have in it the header, title page information, and the abstract, which can be sort of incomplete at this point, and going to have a lot of the other components kind of carry over throughout. The one component to this paper that I want you to give a legitimate shot to, since again, this is getting us rolling, is the introduction component of the paper. So an almost complete abstract or complete abstract, if you're at the point where you understand the data, is what I'm looking for. Again, all the different sections in the skeleton should be laid out. I'll include that in the assignment instructions so you understand exactly what's being looked for. And then after that, you do want that first section of the paper fully written out, which is again called the introduction. Now, if you're wondering, how do I write an introduction? Well, there is a good resource, again, as usual, to help you with figuring out what's supposed to be included and how you're supposed to be discussing the related topics. Specifically, the Purdue website can really help, but also if you're looking for general writing help, there are lots of YouTube videos and other things if you're not familiar with how to describe context and link things up in a way that you would be expected to do in these introductions. It would be fair, the vast majority of you have already shown that you can do that in your earlier writing. It's just now taking this idea that you have and the data that you have and then kind of understanding where you're going to frame it in this introduction. And just a warning, in introductions, you're not talking about stats. You're not talking about the analyses. That's for later on. All you're doing in the introduction is going over the gist of things. So regardless of how far you are in the other components, the introduction still should be just an introduction to the topic and tying things to what it is that you're going to be talking about in the paper and what's been done in the past. Now, so in terms of what you should be including in, sorry, this introduction, you're going to want to resource at least 4 articles at this point in the introduction. I would suggest probably having a few more because you really do want to tie some context around what it is you're talking about. So there's kind of a logical flow to how you're addressing the topic. So the requirement's going to be in the introduction that you're not only referencing 4 things, but you're really tying your ideas to 4 good concrete resources, with at least 3 of them being peer-reviewed articles, and then preferably all 4 of them being peer-reviewed articles, not the book chapters or secondary sources or websites that some of you have been referencing before. It's not necessarily what we're looking for in a lot of these papers, but if you find one or two offshoots, I'm okay with that. But it's got to be primarily focused on the research articles that you're expected to be using for this particular assignment, and many of you have been using for the other components of this class. So in terms of what you're doing, obviously, you see here information on the title page. You can see again what your title page should look like if you go down to the professional paper, because again, this is not a student paper anymore. It's a professional paper that you're going to be writing. And then after you're done including that information from the professional paper, get a walkthrough on the abstract, which again, I'd like you to have at least most of the abstract written, even if you can't quite get to the data. I'd love to see the keywords section. It's another APA component that really helps as you're writing. And I want to see this in APA format. And then you're going to get, again, into the introduction page, which is going to include, if we're looking at APA formatting, the title of your article, and then again, a whole bunch of references to the information and your general idea. Now, if you are relatively new to writing these, you might want to click on the links that you'll see on the page I'm going to provide to you for in-text citations, just so you can understand what you're doing when you're citing something. And then you're going to look at the next one, which is the author and authors, where you learn how to cite something correctly when you're going through something. So in terms of when you cite, how you cite, this link with the basic rules is really critical in terms of the specifics of what you're going to put in your paper when you are citing somebody. This is the kind of in-text citations. Oops, sorry, the in-text citations link. So in-text citation basics, in-text citations authors link is the one that's going to get into the specifics as to what you include when you are either quoting or referencing an idea or talking about a person's general work. The next thing that you're going to do is, again, write the rest of the skeleton out without the content. So you're going to have your methods section, you're going to have your results section, you're going to have your conclusion/discussion section. Note that for this particular paper, since you're not running multiple studies, conclusions and discussion are kind of the same thing. If you get into a multiple studies paper somewhere down the road, you'll see that there's like a couple different discussion sections and then one gigantic conclusion section at the end of the description of all 3 or 4 or 5 studies that are being conducted. Since you're not doing multiple studies for this particular assignment, that's not a required component here. So you're just going to have a discussion/conclusion section, and then you're going to have your reference page. The reference page, sorry, is the last thing that probably should be done entirely. Or at least really close. You might grab a couple extra resources when you work on the latter sections and your results and your conclusions, but I want to see the framework for your reference page included as well. So in terms of what we're looking for, again, I want to see a skeleton of the paper. There'll be details of kind of what things are going to be worth what points, just so you have it laid out. And then I'm going to see a little bit of weight on the abstract. So you're showing me where you're going with it and you understand what an abstract is hypothetically for. I want to see almost a full introduction. I mean, you're going to work on it. This is the rough draft. We're going to edit. But I want to see you just starting with the introduction, showing me you know how to frame your paper, and a continued skeleton where you don't have to include any extra information. I just want you to lay out the sections themselves for the methods, for the results, and for the conclusion/discussion. And then I want to see a detailed reference page, just so you've got the framework ready. And yes, if you grab a couple extra articles as you progress, great, you can add them into your reference page. But at least after this week, you're going to have that reference page started and you're going to be able to just add to things instead of trying to create it at the last minute after you're done with the paper. Now, this might not be a lot of work if you've been doing all of the other stuff. It's more just framing things and getting yourself prepared. But for some of you that have pivoted onto a new topic, the introduction might be a lot of new work where you haven't necessarily had a chance to write things out and go over things in depth. If you're new to APA formatting, figuring out how to create a title page, how do you get up to the headings on your formatting? How do you make sure that the spacing and the fonts and everything is correct? You know, it might be a little bit more work than you're accustomed to. But regardless of how much work you need to do, the nice thing with this particular assignment is it's really setting you up for all the subsequent stuff. If you can get this done, everything else is just filling in the spots because you have everything organized the way it's going to be by the time you get to the end of the class. So hopefully you put a lot into this. It's going to make things a lot easier as you progress. If you do have questions about this as you're going, obviously just send me an email. I've been meeting with a number of you now in the last couple of weeks, which is great because that means that some of you are kind of at that point where you're realizing that the collaboration is essential in these online classes, and having somebody to talk to is going to help. I'm happy to be that person. Maybe your instructor. I'm supposed to be that person, and if this were an in-person class, we'd be looking at your paper day after day, trying to break it down. So I want to encourage you to email me if you want to meet up, talk about things, and we'll find a time because that's a key components to this class. You're struggling with stuff though that you were supposed to know before this class, I also encourage some of you to kind of reach out to some tutoring advisors. Right, the stat stuff I've mentioned in a couple emails to some of you that maybe you're off on your understanding of which statistical analyses to do, or to kind of which ones to not have to do. Some of you did some really interesting calculations in the last one that I'm not sure what they meant. And I understand there's effort there, but we need comprehension in this because, as I mentioned a couple weeks back, the worst thing in the world for somebody when they're doing a research study is to come up with a good idea, run a good study, then now analyze the data and come to conclusions based on the wrong analyses or the wrong interpretations of the data that don't match with what's actually there. And I think a couple of you are in that position where you've come up with something. It's a good idea, giving you data that could work, and what you've provided me with is kind of a description of results and analyses that don't really match the data. And that's something we want to avoid. So I know some of you are still working on that process. Some of you, again, are already well past that. But wherever you're at on that side, focus on the paper this week. Let's just get the paper structured. Let's get things going. And then maybe on the side, if you need help with the data, again, look into tutoring, send me an email. We'll try to talk about some stuff. And hopefully we can get all of you past this big hurdle, because once we get through it, it is kind of easy sailing from here. And things are going to be a lot easier. You just got to do the footwork at that point. This is a big one. So do your best to give yourself ample time for this. And email me if you have questions. And if you don't, I look forward to looking at some skeletons, some interesting papers that I'm hoping are going to get built out as we progress in the last couple weeks. That's it for today. Hope you all are doing well. You take care, and well, I hope to speak with you soon.